Okay, da. Aparatul filmează, nu? Da, dar nu filmează video. Hai. Okay. Okay. Hello, good evening. With a certain delay caused by technical issues, we're going to start the event from the Romanian Pavilion. We are here in Giardini, in the Romanian Pavilion, into Fading Borders, the project that is representing Romania at the Venice Biennale 2021. And this is going to be a round table entitled Migration in the Context of Architecture and the City. I am Ștefan Simion, and together with my colleagues Irina Meliță, Ștefania Hârleață, Radu Târcă, and Cristi Bădescu, we are posted the curatorial team in charge of the pavilion, the Romanian presence. The organizers of the pavilion are the Romanian Ministry of Culture, Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Romanian Cultural Institute, and the Union of Romanian Architects. And the commissioner, Attila Kim, is here today with us. Hello. Please let me introduce the speakers, the two exhibitor teams from the United Kingdom now, Elena Stancu and Cosmin Bumbuț, the journalists that form TELELEU. And we welcome you via internet. Hello. Hi. Hello. And IDEILAGRAM, Ilinca Constantinescu is with us, and also Tudor Constantinescu. The entire team being also composed together with Alex Păun, Iulia Curiman, Laura Popa-Florea, and Gabriela Belcineanu. And we have two guests today: Bogdan Iancu from Bucharest, and Gruia Bădescu. Bogdan Iancu is a lecturer at CNSPA, the National School of Political Studies and Public Administration, the Department of Sociology, and a researcher at the Museum of the Romanian Peasant in Bucharest. And his research interest among his research is the focus on housing and material culture, technology and consumption, urban environment and agricultural policies. And we also have Gruia Bădescu with us, coming from London, right? Even though he is a researcher at the University of Constance and a lecturer also at CNSPA with a Master of Anthropology, and you're actually leading a research these days about the city and how the city welcomes migrants. And later on this meeting, you will get into this. And now I'm going to pass the microphone to Irina Meliță, who is going to moderate this meeting. Thank you.
Hi everyone, sorry for the delay. Thank you for being here first. At the beginning of our talk, I would like to invite the two exposing teams to present their project as it is here at the pavilion, and how they came to answer our call in this Biennale. First, I will give the mic to Ilinca.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in the pavilion. So I will make a very, very short presentation on our research in shrinking cities in Romania, and I'm starting with. I'm starting with this image with the outlines of the shrinking cities in Romania, a drawing made by our colleague and my brother, Alexandru Păun. And I'm starting with that because our research talks about a state of the cities that is in a continuous transformation. And this is how this drawing should be regarded. These are the actual outlines of the shrinking cities in Romania. And I think it's a very beautiful image, especially taking into consideration that it's unique and that tomorrow maybe it won't look the same. Maybe Stefan, if you could help me with I only have 10 slides. I wrote some things down because otherwise I tend to speak more than my time. Okay, so this is our team, IDEILAGRAM team. So what I wanted to point out, first of all, are the reasons why we started this project and what we wanted to point out with, and of course the beautiful mirroring with Elena and Cosmin. I'm so happy that we are together, and right now the curtain is opening, so we can really face the two phenomena, and the borders are opening. So this exhibition and the research started in 2009, so it's a long time ago, and it relieves the consequences that the administrative, the political, the economic major changes of the last 30 years have had on the built and social Romanian environment. And that was one of the stakes, to bring together these two consequences and to put them on the same drawing, so to say. And the project was motivated and still is, unfortunately, in all these more than 10 years of studies, that things have not changed very much in the public discourse and in the regard of the shrinkage of the cities. It was motivated on the one hand, next please, to provide a clear picture, not very clear, but of the current state of the Romanian cities, and on the other hand, to demonstrate the extent to which this phenomenon is overlooked in the Romanian public discourse by the exclusive focus on the growth processes. And I only chose to present here these two maps, and I invite you, of course, to visit the exhibition, to find out more and to make the relationship with Cosmin and Elena. Because these two maps present all of the Romanian cities, so all of the 320. And this is just to show that although the discourse is always focused on growth, the subject of shrinkage is actually a major one because it refers to almost all the cities in Romania. So it is a subject that really concerns every single one of us, be us architects or anthropologists or just simple dwellers of the cities. So it's something that should not and cannot be ignored, and this is the other issue that the exhibition is talking about. It's talking about a change of mindset also in the way that we teach architecture at the School of Architecture. Myself being the teaching assistant at the University of Architecture. So I state the dominance of this position of major of a discourse that only concerns major stories and ignoring the minor ones that are actually dominant. Next, please. All right. So of course that everything that happened after in the last 30 years cannot be understood if it's not put in a relationship with what happened ever since urban planning as a discipline was put into place. So the exhibition wants to to bring together the stories about the growth of the cities in parallel with the story of degrowth, because otherwise it cannot be understood. Next, please. But of course, that all this analysis is a rather cold type of analysis. It's an analysis that's based on urban research, on data. So of course that Tudor and I wanted to see Tudor Constantinescu. We wanted to see how these things reflect in the actual territory. So in 2000, I don't even remember, 2011 I think, or 2012, we started visiting the Romanian cities. So we were not that much away as Cosmin and Elena, but there are some similarities with their research from this point of view. And I have to tell you that ever since the beginning, the stories were somehow connected. But we'll probably talk about this later. Anyway, in our first map, and this is another thing that I really want to point out very clearly, is that these shrinking cities are not just the post-industrial cities. There are also cities that might be regarded as prosperous cities. And although they have very different image or a very different reason to be, they share the same consequences of shrinkage. And this is how so Tudor and I grouped the recurrent images that we managed to see in the cities and put them into a sort of a stage of a degradation. But I don't want it to be necessarily regarded in a negative way. It's just a transformation stage that the cities are going through. Yeah. So you have first the engine, so the collapse of the main institutions. Then this thing transfers into the collapse of the socio-cultural facilities, so the urban facilities that actually define a city or a town. Then this transfers further on in the public space and finally in the dwellings. Next, please. And only after having had these two types of researches, so the analytical one and the one that was observed in place, could we give the definition of what we call a shrinking city. And you will see here that the first layer that we consider important is the social and cultural shrinkage. Physical shrinkage, the economic one, and the demographic shrinkage, which is maybe the one that is the one that links maybe the best the two exhibitions. And just to give you next, please, thank you. All right. So just to give another reason why this phenomena concerns us all, so the Romania's population will be in 30 years with almost 4 million people smaller. So of course that the architects and the urban planners need to take all these things into consideration when thinking about everything that they do. So this is apart from migration. Next, please. And you can see these things very well in the catalog. But this is just to point out two very short aspects. So on the left, you have the external migration, and on the right, the internal migration. And maybe these whole things could be summed up in the following screen. All right. So you could say, of course, in a very simplistic way, maybe, that while the communist years were dominated by a trend towards the towns and the cities, the reality of today is characterized by these two phenomena. So the one that TELELEU is talking about, the massive migration, but also the fact that since 1997, although there are some magnet cities in Romania towards which people go to, the dominant numbers show that people tend to move rather to the rural areas. So why would this thing shed into a different light the shrinking cities? Because they might be, as the tendencies show, they might really become the choice for the people. And I will end with our last slide. Thank you. So in the exhibition, we put together 5 different cases. There are 5 different shrinking cities in which really make use of the transformations that their towns are going through, and they do that in a positive way. So what might be regarded as a negative fact actually becomes here the very starting point of the really coming of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilinca. Thank you so much, Ilinca. I will ask now Elena to tell us a little about TELELEU's part of the Romanian Pavilion in Venice.
Hello, I will be pretty short because I'm not sure if you can hear me very well.
We hear you very well. Very, very well.
Great.
Every little sound you make, we hear. So be careful.
Okay, Cosmin has a problem. He can't stay quiet so long. So for him, it's complicated to stay quiet so long. So I am Elena Stancu, I'm a journalist. Cosmin Bumbuț here, the noisy one, is a photographer. And this is our camper van. We are living in this camper van for 8 years. We will be 8 years in November. And in January 2019, we began a project on the Romanian diaspora in Europe. Romania is the EU country with most citizens living abroad, says Politico, and we wanted to understand why 5 million Romanians have left to work abroad and what this migration has meant for them, their families, and their adopted countries. So what you see in the exhibition is a part of our work. The stories we have documented so far in Spain, Germany, and Portugal. Since the exhibition was prepared, we have also been to Italy, and now we are in the United Kingdom. But of course, they weren't. The project were already in time to be presented in the exhibition. And what we have done in our project, and what you can see in the exhibition, is the stories of the Romanian immigrants, carers, housekeepers, construction workers, bartenders, migrant workers, doctors. It has been covered a lot. A lot of people, a lot of politicians, and also press talked about the Romanian diaspora, but the way people talked about Romanian diaspora was more in numbers and percentages. We were talking about the money sent home, the number of crimes the Romanians are committing abroad, or the voter turnout during the elections. But what we lack to talk about is the problems of the Romanian immigrants in the European country where they work, and the issues that cause them to leave their homeland. So this is what our project is doing. We are documenting the individual stories of the immigrants in the countries where they live. We follow them in their daily lives, and we accompany them at work, at home, grocery shopping with their families. in each detail relevant for what their life. So this is what you are going to see, or you have already seen in the exhibition. These stories of the individual people, of the individual Romanian immigrants. So I think it's that is our story shortly.
Thank you. So now I would like to ask you to tell us of all these years of research and observing and analyzing these phenomena that you present here at the pavilion, you must have come to some core facts that you see over and over, some central issues that are in the middle of your project and your research. And I would like to ask you to maybe share them with us so that we can further continue our discussion from these core facts that would be a main thing in your research. Ilinca?
All right, is that better? Okay. Unfortunately, in all these years, as I started to say before, not that many things have changed from the top-down approach, so to say. But at the same time, there were a lot of individual actions that started, that I think make the Romanian urbanity very special today. And I think that these things are going to make it easier for some coherent urban policies to take place. But we're not necessarily here to talk about urban policies, but to point out those strong facts, so to say, so to observe the things that need to be observed. So first of all, I don't know, as an overall regard, in these 30 years, the Romanian cities have tried to adapt to this globalization model, but by doing so, what they did this at a cost of spatial and social divisions that are, if you go in the territory, you can notice them very well. Because probably most of us, we live in big cities. We are part of our own world. But these social divisions are very strong in the smaller towns, and while this public discourse is always about the powerful and is always about the happy stories, and this is what the politicians and the journalists want to talk about, or they want to talk about extremes, and to stigmatize maybe in a certain way and present realities different than in a different way than they really are. The Romanian reality is actually characterized more by this smaller domestic scale that reflects also in the built environment, but also in the human relationships. And I think that is a very important aspect to take into consideration as an architect and as an urban planner. That you don't really need to show muscles in order to deal with this more subtle reality of the whole country. Then, as these cities have actually gone through a trauma, and it occurred to me many times to think about this, as if one needs to accept their own past and these issues that might not seem that pleasant in order to go to a shrink. I don't know. You cannot actually move further unless you really understand what your past was about, and in order to understand the present and to be able to build something that can really last. So, and this is why shrinkage is ignored
by the local administrations. I mean, of course that they observe some things, of course that the economic issues or some of the social, very stringent issues are being observed. But talking about it as a whole with all those aspects that I presented before is almost inexistent. And whenever I was asked to present about this case publicly, I was either asked to smoothen it a little bit or to present it with some different words or to present it with some recipes, some success recipes. And of course, as all of us know, the success recipes do not go for all. I mean, my needs are very different from your needs, and so this is the way that the towns and the cities also are. Because Elena and Cosmin were saying that they document the individual stories of the people that live abroad, because every single one of them is a carrier of their own past, and then they adapt in that new place by having this luggage, I don't know, this Romanian luggage with them, and so this is what happens with the towns and the cities as well. Each of them needs to be understood in its own personality in order to be able to move further on. So so this public discourse of disregard towards shrinking cities makes them unattractive even for architects and urban planners. And as I pointed out, the subject is major. However, maybe I don't know, Irina, may I speak or continue? Because I wanted to speak a little bit about the migration too, if I have one or two more minutes. So you all saw how the Romanian map looks like, and the fact that those various forms of decline that translate in an urban life that is not even that urban anymore, and that actually defines the quality of living, of being in a certain town, simply pushes entire communities to live elsewhere. And so by the end of 2015, there are already 4 million Romanians that had permanently emigrated to other states, although most of them have kept these strong connections to the country. And what the papers say, they say that there were, in the last 20 years, $53 billion were sent by those people to Romania. This is what the papers say. Of course, that some of these people will decide to live forever in another countries, but there is a large part of them that come back to Romania and they build new houses, and they build them with the new knowledges that they got when living in those certain countries. And I believe that there, I mean, of course, there were different stages of these new housing built by migrants, and I have this feeling that they have changed, that they want different things right now from their new homes, but maybe we will discuss about this later. Well, anyway, you might have the feeling that all these facts are negative, but why are they maybe not that negative, and why are they so important? Because the present day, which was confronted by all these changes and the pandemic that has pointed out more clearly all the flaws and all those social divisions and so on and so forth, they reveal a desire that's even more than before to embrace a hybrid type of urbanity, because the Romanian reality of today is characterized also by this need to go to this more moderate. So it's characterized by this rural trend, as I showed you on the map. but also the towns, the cities are, by losing their urban attributes, they become more ruralized. So there are these metamorphoses.
Sorry, let us talk about that after when we will superpose those facts.
Of course, yes. Yes, because I think it deserves a more broader discussion.
Exactly. So I would like Elena now to point out those main facts that will be the starting point of our discussion. And then I would like Bogdan and Iulia to comment on these main things of each project. Thank you. Elena, did you hear me?
No, I didn't hear.
Sorry.
I didn't hear anything.
Yeah. Could you please tell us the main points of TELELEU that you discovered during your research? Those 4 facts that really are in the middle of what you saw and documented. That would be the base of our further discussion.
A lot of people, when interviewing us about our work, was asking, so how are the Romanians in diaspora? What's your conclusions? And we usually say we don't have any conclusion. We can't describe the Romanian communities in the diaspora because they are so different. And our biggest important conclusion is that we don't have a conclusion. The diaspora communities we have met are so different, and their stories and the reasons that made them leave the country are so different that it's very hard to think of some core facts or some raw conclusions that can describe them. So what I can tell you is that their words are so different. You have these traditional communities in Spain and Italy who moved there for 15 or 20 years ago and who are quite integrated in their new countries and they build a life there. In the same time, saving some of their Romanian values and continuing to celebrate Easter or Christmas or different other celebrations in the Romanian style. But in the same time, these families have already their children already grew up in their new countries. Either their children were born there in Spain or Italy, or their children were really young when their parents moved to Spain and Italy. And what we've seen, because we think that the stories of these young people are very important, is that you have these young Romanians who are now between 15 and 20 years old, or maybe more, maybe 25 years old, and they can hardly speak Romanian anymore. But in the same time, they know that they are Romanian because their parents are Romanian and their parents tell them that they are Romanian. And they try to cope with this ethnic identity. They have it from their families, but in the same time, they need to cope with the identity of the countries they live in. So it's like you have these young people who are more Spanish in the way they think, in the way they act in the society, but in the same time they have this Romanian inheritance that they have to understand and to integrate this in their lives. And this group of young people is very interesting, and we focused on it a lot. You can see in the exhibition the story of El Romagnol. El Romagnol, it's a Romanian rap singer who was 7 years old when his father took him to Spain as an illegal immigrant. He continued to be an illegal immigrant for many years until 2007 when Romania joined the EU. And this young man can hardly speak Romanian, but he sings in Romanian about his pride of being a Romanian. In the same time, you have these migrant workers who, from our point of view, never left the country, even though you meet them in the fields from Germany, where they work in agriculture. Actually, they have never lived. They never left Romania because when they decided to go to work to Germany for 6 months a year, or some of them for 10 months a year, they continued to work and to live in the same community, because you have these communities from very small villages who move to Germany. Almost the entire community of young people who are able to work, they go to work abroad, and they usually go to the same farm, because when the first of them arrives, he will bring his cousins, then he will bring his neighbors, and then he will bring whatever relatives want to work abroad. So you have these communities who live in a farm. They have these barracks inside the farm where they live, and usually you'll see that they live in the same neighborhood like the one at home, because they usually choose their rooms near the rooms of their cousins, or near the rooms of their neighbors at home in Romania, but they are in Germany at a farm in Nuremberg, for example. So they continue to speak Romanian. They don't learn German, because actually they never intend to live in Germany. Even though they spend 10 months a year working in Germany, they don't want to establish there, because actually there is no way for them to integrate, because they live in this farm, and they stay in the barracks. They don't see the town. They don't go to visit Nuremberg. They just work as many hours as they can, because with the money they earn working in agriculture, they support their children who are at home, raised by their grandparents. So with the money these people earn as migrant workers, usually they support 3 generations. They support themselves, they support their children, and they also support the grandparents who raise the kids while their parents are abroad. In the same time, we have this very highly educated diaspora who is living abroad. Right now, a month ago, we came from Italy to the United Kingdom, where we are now. And in Italy, for example, we documented the doctors and the nurses, the Romanian doctors and nurses who live and work in Peschiera del Garda. And of course, their story is completely different from the story of these migrant workers, because they speak Italian fluently. They are well integrated in Italy. They are very good professionals at work. They are respected for their work. So the way that they will present their life abroad is completely different from the way these migrant workers will present their life abroad. So this was one of the reasons when everybody asked us what's our conclusion about the Romanian diaspora, is that we don't have a conclusion, because focusing on these individual stories, we observe all these tones of gray, which are a lot of tones of gray, and when you start talking about these tones of gray, it's very hard to draw the line and say, well, these are the conclusions, these are the facts, these are the problems the Romanians face abroad. And also when talking about xenophobia and discrimination, for example, because there is xenophobia and discrimination abroad, we kind of realize that the Romanian immigrants who face discrimination and xenophobia are usually are usually from the labor market, like very like jobs like I don't know, housekeepers or workers in agriculture or construction workers. And at some point we realized that this discrimination actually it's not a discrimination based on their ethnicity, based on their country of origin, but this discrimination is it's a class discrimination actually because most of the educated Romanians who have well-paid jobs won't have the same experience like a Romanian worker who can't speak German and works in a field somewhere in Germany. And when you will talk to them, and if you ask Romanian doctor who works in Italy, he will say that there is no discrimination. I'm so happy here. I'm well seen in the society, and everybody treats me with respect. But if you would ask, for example, a Romanian who works in the field in Spain, in Huelva province, for example, he will say that, yeah, I faced a lot of discrimination and I was treated badly and I have a lot of bad experiences. So this is, I think I spoke too much. This is our conclusion about not having any conclusion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a rather follow-up question, rather tricky, because I heard you other time saying that this discrimination occurs even in the diaspora, in the Romanian diaspora. Some Romanians discriminate others. Is it true?
Yeah, we have encountered that, and it's pretty sad. Because usually when we write on, for example, we post on Facebook one of the stories we have just published, and or when we arrived to the United Kingdom, we said we wrote that we are now in the United Kingdom, and there were people from the diaspora which are part of these very well-paid jobs and very educated communities, and they started to tell us they were really upset. Why do you always write about migrant workers? Why write about Romanians working construction? Why don't you write about people who work in IT or doctors? Or even though we did, I mean, we covered both kind of Romanian immigrants. Even though we did, it's kind of a shame. They don't want to be in the same group with this kind of diaspora. They only want to be considered. To present the Romanian diaspora as a very educated community, which is so generous to each other, who are so integrated in their society. And I think this is kind of a frustration they get when they leave Romania, and they always feel the need to prove that they are better than the way the Romanian immigrants were presented in the media in those countries, or they want to separate from all the prejudices that accompany the Romanian immigrants who have, of course, more social problems, because if they come from a very poor environment, they are not educated, and they do this kind of jobs where they risk to be exploited and whatever is covered by the news, then they kind of feel like this putting them in the same group, it's something that will damage their image. And it's something that we are still struggling to understand. We don't have an answer regarding this problem. But
I wanted to ask a question because I wanted to go further with this, because I think it will be very important further in our discussion when we will get to the solutions of the things we talk about now. And now I would like Bogdan to comment on the core facts that he heard from Ilinca and Elena.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I would like to express my appreciation for both projects. Okay. Okay. So I would like to express my appreciation for the both projects here, and because as an anthropologist, I'm very happy to see that this phenomenon, dramatic phenomenon in terms of numbers and in terms of effects. I'm a brother of a sister who lives in Italy, and I have the nieces here. So half of my future family is somehow is here in Rome. So I would like to start from the last discussion because I think it's very important to frame this somehow this clash between the white collars and the so-called like peasants, țărani. You know, in Romania we have a long history of this. Clash, you know, during the socialism, also it was like being a peasant. It was like a shame image. It is like in Italy, they have this word for people from south of Italy, conta, contadino. No? It's conta. So I would like to frame this important discussion about the white collars are expats and the peasants are migrants. And for me, it's very interesting the politics of the politics of semantics, if you want, in this case. And then I would like to add a personal history to contribute to this discussion. For example, I recall that the case of my parents living in a block of flats in a small, in a medium small village in Romania, which passed the process of shrinkage with the 2 or 3 important industry items were closed, and the block of flats of my parents actually it's like half it's empty. So I would like to discuss about the emptiness of this a lot of block of flats in Romania and how this block of flats can be for this block can be imagined some projects in order to cope with infrastructural problems. For example, when I ask my mother or my father when I go to my hometown to take a shower, they said, okay, but you must open like 10 minutes before because the hot water it's not instant. You don't have an instant access. So I think it's very important to reflect on these small aspects of everyday lives in these types of urban infrastructure. On the same time, I will go back to the rural dimension of this migration because I think it's more. In terms of numbers, I think the migration from the rural space is more dramatic somehow because we have this image of the captionari, no, or in Italy they call it braccianti, no? So there are persons going to be the last peasants of Europe, or somehow this is a very important aspect of this migration. And I think that white collars, these expats must understand the importance of this contribution to the production in Europe, because from Germany to Italy to Portugal or Spain, these are very important persons for the production of food. So I think we must talk about this in terms not only about the conditions which made possible the migration, but also how these people contribute to the food production. And here I would stop in order to ask two questions, one for you and one for Cosmin and Elena. And for example, for you,
Could you please first let Gruia comment also on those main ideas that the girls talked about, and then I'm sorry that you have to do this dance, but it's nice.
Musical chairs are always nice. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So first, let me thank you for the invitation and also congratulate this absolutely amazing exhibit and the two pieces of research that are integrated. I really recommend everyone to come and see this because it's maybe as a reaction first to explain a bit about my positionality as we call it. So I have a double hat somehow. On the one hand, I'm a researcher and I've been working first on architects and dealing with cities that experience war, so people fleeing war, and in the last 2 years with the Humboldt Fellowship working on what happens in cities that receive migrants. So somehow I'm interested in this, but somehow from not in the Romanian context. Second, I'm Romanian, I'm a migrant, transnational existence going back and forth from different countries. So seeing this exhibit and also listening to your core facts today really hit a note on me. First, if you think about the number of people who left Romania and thinking about reports of the UN that in terms of numbers, only Syria has more people. I'm not talking about proportion. Bulgaria lost even more people than Romania in terms of proportion, but in terms of sheer numbers, we're comparable with Syria. And the big question is why a country in peace is losing so many people, which is similar to a country that experiences horrible civil war. That's a question that actually this exhibit is really asking, and what I really liked in the way you tell the stories is that you're not concentrating on only on the sort of discrimination, for instance, that migrants are facing, but on why are they leaving? What would be their life in Romania? What happens with their access to from sewage to healthcare? So what are all the dynamics and all these whys? And look and in the mirror between the shrinking cities and also the desolate rural landscape and where they go. So I congratulate you for this. So maybe now. What I wanted to actually to ask, can we ask questions now? Maybe not. Okay. It kind of connects, but
yeah. Go ahead. No,
so
of course.
In your research with the stories of migrants in Western Europe, to what extent did you find reflections on the migrants coming to fill those vacant jobs in various booming cities in Romania, not the shrinking ones, coming from Sri Lanka, from Pakistan? To what extent is there a level of empathy, or to what extent do we have a situation of nested discrimination happening? Now going to the shrinking cities, a fabulous exploration of these landscapes of desolation. We have to place them also in the post-socialist landscape. This happens from, let's say, from Bosnia to Vladivostok, and this idea this expresses on the one hand the condition of post-socialism, but also what's happening globally with the lack of territorial cohesion. So we're here at the Biennale, in which the curatorial statement says we need a new spatial contract, but also we need a new territorial contract in which we think about territory and towns and struggling places, and not go into this 30 years of fascination with the urban, the big agglomeration, the metropolis, as the place of interaction and therefore the only solution for human growth. So I think this is something that your research shows very well, territorial cohesion. And then maybe I'll stop here and then we can continue. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to answer now, Elena? Did you hear the question that Gray asked?
If you can repeat it, please, because our sound is not so good. We don't hear very well what you are talking there.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
We hear around 70%, I think, of
Maybe
what you're.
Can we type in the chat of the Zoom? No. Okay. Okay.
No, if you repeat it
slowly.
one more time.
Okay. So I was asking, in your interactions with people outside of the country, to what extent were they referring to the migrants arriving in Romania somehow to take their place in various jobs? And to what extent is that, because it's interesting, in the last few years, many places in Romania are hiring people, particularly from Sri Lanka and Pakistan, and there's this discussion of a fear of a growth in xenophobia in Romania, things that happen already in Western Europe, and somehow are these stories in a mirror, and to what extent do they reflect on that?
If we talk about the migrant workers, for example, or about the Romanian immigrants who come from not so developed parts of Romania, then we have to talk more about their profile. And if we talk, for example, about capsunari, about the strawberry pickers in Spain, or about the Romanian migrant workers in Germany who work in agriculture in Germany, we have to consider the fact that these people were called slaves and lepers by the Romanians back home. These people were mocked, and politicians sometimes declared some very inappropriate things about them. And these people have a lot of frustration and of sufferings who come out of their poverty and the fact that made them to leave Romania. So these Romanians might be at some point very nationalist, even though they work abroad and they work in Germany. They might be Eurosceptic. And this surprise, we have seen it in the elections, in the parliamentary elections last year in Romania, when the diaspora, who usually voted for pro-European parties, now they voted for the Alliance for the Unification of Romanians, who is a far-right party. And I think this says a lot about their profile. So when you talk about these kinds of migrants, then I don't think they are too happy to let foreigners come in their country and do the jobs that they are not willing to do anymore in Romania because they prefer to go and work abroad. And I don't think foreigners are welcomed in this kind of communities who came from very poor parts of Romania. But in the same time, if we talk about the well-paid people, Romanian immigrants who work in corporations or who work as doctors, of course they are integrated in the countries where they live, and they share the same values with the community where they integrated. So for them, these kind of workers would be welcomed in Romania. These kind of foreign workers would be welcomed. But again, it's very hard to establish a general profile of the Romanian immigrant because they are so different. From our point of view, the diaspora, Romanian diaspora community, it's a replica of small dimensions of Romania population, which is normal to be. So it's very hard. While it's very hard to make a profile of a country, it's the same. It's the same. It's so difficult to draw a profile of these Romanian immigrants. So I think we have to be careful because, from our point of view, nationalism and Euroscepticism among Romanian diaspora might be a danger from our point of view.
But just to refrain in a very short answer, what Luia's question was, or maybe reframe it myself. So these Romanians are not willing to come back in Romania and do the jobs that are now done by foreigners here.
Sorry, can you repeat the question because sometimes it interrupts?
So the Romanian migrants are not willing to go back and work in Romania the jobs that are taken now by foreigners here in Romania.
This is another problem. The idea is even though they won't come back because most of the Romanians we have talked to don't want to come back to Romania. In the same time, they never admit to themselves. A lot of them, not all of them, of course. A part of them won't admit to themselves. No, we will never get back to Romania. Our life will never be in Romania anymore. And this is the reason why, and also Ilinca was saying, they build a lot of houses in Romania, but have a lot of houses in Romania built by these Romanian immigrants who now live and work abroad. And they constructed these houses, and will never come back to these houses. We will just have villages of empty houses. And this is a reflection, a very good reflection of the fact that they don't accept yet the thought that they won't come back anymore.
Yeah.
But most of them won't come back because now that their children are grown up, they grew up in Spain or Italy or Germany, they won't be able to integrate in Romania. They don't understand. When we talked to them, we realized that okay, they don't know, of course, the history or the geography of Romania, of course, because they studied in Italy or Germany. Of course, they don't have any context about Romania and they don't speak the language. But they don't understand the society in Romania. So I don't think these young people will come back to Romania. And also their parents won't leave their grandchildren there in Italy for them to come back in Romania.
Yeah.
So I think the reason why they reject the idea of foreigners coming to Romania is because of the thought that I will come back home.
Okay. Yeah.
One day.
Okay.
Even though
That
they
makes
won't.
sense. Yes. I will cue with that Ilinca answering Gruia's question because I think it relates to the houses that were built and left empty. And then Bogdan, since we changed and asked questions, now you ask your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. I think it works. So you were mentioning on the one hand that territorial analysis that needs to be done, and there was actually a drawing by Cedric Price. He drew the medieval city as a boiled egg. I think you know that drawing, don't you? Then when it expanded, it was a fried egg. Then it became an omelette. And probably the future characteristic that I read about is also a culinary, gastronomic comparison is the Kaiserschmarrn, which is something that, a dessert that has such different densities that you need a special tool to operate with. And so it's, and you are also speaking about the fact that the shrinking cities occur definitely in all the former communist countries, but not only on those countries, but also on the countries that used to be super industrialized and so on and so forth. And probably Germany was the country that had the most coherent urban policies because there were the two stories, they were the two twins that went into different directions, and this is why they could take the measures beforehand, so they could really anticipate a lot of things. And Bogdan, you were describing the case that I can confirm that it happens in all the cities in Romania. So Tudor and I have documented this. We've documented blocks of flats where there was only one family living, and they had no connection whatsoever to heating or water. We've documented blocks of flats all over the country that were not connected to the national heating system, so they had their own parallel system. And we've met people that were telling us in tourist resorts that they've been living alone on their I don't know, on their in their apartment for half a year, and then so they're only a few months a year when some families come back for holidays. So I can confirm that. And actually, in Germany, this happened. In the 90s. There were, I think, 1 million flats that were abandoned. But the difference was, the blocks of flats looked almost the same as in Romania. But as the socialist project in Eastern Germany could be funded the whole way by the state, they didn't need, as in Romania, to sell the apartments even during the communist time to the owners. So the blocks of flats, they still belonged to the state, so they could enter a public policy. So they could become a part of a coherent public policy, which in Romania is impossible to do in the same way. So that is one of the big, because people don't want to live in those types of blocks of flats anymore. Either they emigrate, or they just buy some new dwellings in some apartments that are at the outskirts of the large cities and so on and so forth. So it is another fact that these blocks of flats are inhabited by aged population. So that is the question. What is the future of those flats?
Bogdan, can you ask your questions for... You should try to speak really into the mic so Elena can hear you well.
Yeah, it's okay. Actually, I would like to start with the case of rural Romanian migration and recalling the image of the barracks. You know, I think that the image of barracks could be somehow the brand of rural migration, of the căpșunari, or how we call it. And I think we anthropologists and architects must working on this topic, so that the condition of living on and how these barracks became somehow houses, home for these persons. And I will ask you, Elena and Cosmin, if these persons imagine some home project for them or for their children. So there is a project, because we have this Romanian obsession for being owner, you know, to own a home, not only to build a home. So we have this somehow this obsession of being owner of the house. So there is a project for having a house there or in Romania, or because we know that at the beginning of the migration it was this landscape of conspicuous houses, no, bright houses, and then okay, moderate, but this process continues or not, and I don't know. It will be difficult to answer to this question of Ilinca about the future of these empty houses in the urban areas, because I don't know. Maybe we can imagine a politics of social houses, For example, in order to put the state in discussion, in order to I know attract the people from the suburbs in these houses, because the suburbanization of Romania is also another topic important in this discussion.
I think
Thank
that
you.
we will get to some conclusions later, but I wanted to ask you if you want your two questions towards the teams, to ask them now or after we talk about the next subject. After, okay. Because I think that now the core effect we talked about, we saw what are the main issues of every research. I wanted to ask you, where does these issues overlap? Where do they meet, the main issues from shrinking cities with the main issues from TELELEU? And maybe we can start to think of some solutions from this intersection. Can you rapidly, because we are kind of running out of time, state some points of departure from these solutions? Ilinca first and then Elena? Thank you.
I've been asked very many times about solutions. At one point, I was really trying to sketch some ideas that would be as general as possible in order to be able to be personalized. I don't know, by the cities. But I would like to point out first one thing that that I believe that the stories that Elena and Cosmin are collecting are inseparable for the moment, at least for this generation, are inseparable from the realities of the Romanian cities. And also, as a fact, that the public policies do not take either of these subjects into considerations as they should be globally and at this huge scale. I mean, Gruia was talking about the fact that Romania is like in Syria's case, although it's in terms of peace. I've never heard about this fact being transformed in a policy that could take care of these people and their families, because there is a lot of drama that's going on besides the empty homes. There is a lot of trauma that is affecting the generations that Elena was talking about, the children that live home alone, that Tudor and I have documented. So we've talked to children that were living sometimes even with neighbors. And so on the one hand, to go back to this inseparable relationship between the two, that's very difficult to point or to grasp, because it is like an immaterial heritage that's moving from one place to another. But the fact that is immaterial actually just means that there needs to be a collaboration between various fields, because this time it's not a field of architects or urban planners alone anymore. It's not a field of anthropologists alone anymore. It's not a field of journalists anymore. So they all need to work together in order to construct something.
True. That's what we try to do, bring us together. Elena and Cosmin, did you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I understood the question. The idea is that the reason that Romanians continue to leave their country and to leave their young children alone, it's. Do you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Yes, we hear you very well.
Okay. So the reasons why the Romanians are doing that, it has a political reason, and we can't talk about migration without talking about politics, because it's all these social problems Romania has, dropping out underage mothers, poverty, unemployment, corruption. So before we are talking about, I think before we are talking about programs for the Romanians who work abroad, or before trying to solve the problem of the cities from an architectural point of view, I think we have to try to solve all these social problems because they are the problems Romania is facing today, and these are the reasons why we have these economical problems, we have these problems in our everyday life. So, what we found out, for example, in Germany, in Nuremberg, where there are a lot of Romanian migrants who work in agriculture, is that most of them dropped out of school after 8th grade because they couldn't afford the commute to a high school in the nearest town. So I think we have to talk about this subject first. This is the first thing we have to address. The first social problem we have to address in Romania. Then we have also in Germany we met a lot of young women who gave birth to their first child when they were teenagers, when they were 15 or 16. We also met in Germany people who were working in agriculture, migrant workers, who couldn't read or write. And this is a consequence of the shortcomings of the Romanian education system. And also a German farm owner told us that one of her Romanian employees couldn't count, so she had no way of checking how much she was paid. So illiteracy means vulnerability, and it puts many Romanians at risk of exploitation. So also we met a young girl who, despite having a chance to go to a high school, abandoned her studies when she was in high school because she preferred to go to work in Germany. Because in Romania, education won't guarantee you can make you can make a living. So I think before talking about the other tones of gray that represents the problem of Romania today, we have to solve all these social problems, we have to solve it anyway.
Thank you. Bogdan, can you comment on the solutions?
Yeah, actually, for an anthropologist, it's a nightmare to offer a solution because we used to deconstruct and to analyze and somehow to be like a DJ of the distance, taking distance from this reality somehow, and I think it will be important to not only for anthropology but for sociology and geography, human geography, and planners, urban planners to reflect on these realities. First of all, I think we need to document these realities, and I must underline that we don't have in the Romanian social sciences. This topic is not very documented. We have a colleague, Remus Gabriela Angel, an anthropologist working on the Romanian migration in Italy and Germany. We have 2 or 3 anthropologists working on this topic, but I think if we take in consideration the dimension of the phenomenon, it's like very small, and I think it will be important in the next years to have money to invest in research of this topic, not only from this point of view, but with the economic and social effects also. And then I think the solution will be designed after the investigation of these realities, because we don't know that, for example, we have all this exhibition about the condition of work of these persons, but we don't have photos from inside the barracks, you know, the place where people used to live, because
We have.
I know you have, I know you have, but the representation of condition of living of these persons is very important for us in order to understand, for example, the frustrations. You know, when you talk about the frustrations, many of these are the result of the condition of living or the condition of working also, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruya, can you comment?
Thank you. So I will answer I will react to something that Elena said with something Ilinca said. So basically, you're saying that the social, which of course it's a big worry, should come first in the approaches, and somehow architecture should later on. I think that going back to what Ilinca was saying, I think it's time to work together. But and while we have a strong need for more lobby for social programs and for social policy and for thinking with this element, the bridge should be made, and little interventions and particularly participatory projects, like the one you are highlighting in your list, show that actually while this is a social problem, the architecture and urban planning worlds are not just spectators; they have a role at stake. So while, for instance, I was looking in the last few years how architects react to the conditions of forced migrants arriving in their city, how there are different forms of co-work and co-production of spaces. This can happen also with aspects of shrinking, but also with how to deal with this. And maybe what I was saying earlier about nestedness. What if some of the spaces in shrinking cities will be hosting new migrants to Romania? And then finally, we have this situation of we're talking about climate change and all these issues. We're talking about degrowth. So maybe shrinking cities are desirable, actually, if we think about the degrowth. That how do we live together in the context of these tremendous climate changes?
Thank you so much. We should start an institution. I wanted to ask you, in the context of what's going on in the world now, I mean, in the world, in Europe with migration, why should we try to bring back the people that left and not any people, as we started discussion already? But maybe we should focus on involving in this optimistic project of the shrinking city that will reinvent itself, involving other persons, not the ones that left that city, because as we heard, Elena and Cosmin said their experience is that those people don't really want to go back. Can we involve them and convince them to come, or should we focus on maybe expanding the view? Who wants to answer? Yeah, Ilinca, you have the mic.
Just a short answer. I think that's a very, very good question. Because if you take a look at policies, at shrinking cities policies, you will see that some policies that were focused exactly on this thing, on bringing back those people, or on a strategy that seems so dictatorial in a way, they failed. And so the approach that that successful policies had was focusing on improving the quality of life first for the citizens that remained there. And this proved, but of course it's such a long-term effect that you cannot give an answer to that. But taking care of the people that remained in a certain town would definitely have positive consequences, and they might attract new people, or even the ones that left. So this is, from my point of view, the first answer that one would do. It would be an indirect approach. Yes, approach.
Elena, Cosmin, what do you think?
I didn't hear the question too well. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Why Should
Maybe you can repeat it because I think the former hear the conversation.
This mic is
You
better?
are connected to it. Yeah, I think your mic is better.
This one is better. The question was, why should we convince the people that left to come back to the cities that we want to work with now, the shrinking cities, you know? So we are trying to involve people in this optimistic project of trying to find value in shrinking cities. And I was wondering, why should we convince the people that left to come back, and why not expand our view to maybe any people to come back? Since you said that they are not so willing to come back to Romania. What do you think? Could some policies convince them to return or not?
I think the policy to make people return to Romania, I don't think they are too efficient. So I don't think that this is a solution. A lot of Romanian politicians were talking in a in a very PR point of view that we have to convince our Romanians to come back home. No, I don't think this is the solution. First of all, because it's a cliche. It's like always talking about Romanians abroad from this perspective, which I'm not sure if it's a correct perspective. And secondly, because we don't talk about how do we convince the Romanians who are still in Romania to stay in Romania and not live abroad also. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the question has its answer in itself. We should convince anybody to come and live there, not necessarily the Romanians who left or the ones who are planning to leave.
Thank you. Gruian, what do you think?
As I was saying, one possibility is actually this is what's happening. Instead of having migrant workers who come and stay in barracks, they can be given better accommodation. But again, that's a very political hot potato in a Europe in which you have different right platforms that actually are against that. So if you look at East Germany, for instance, when refugees were resettled after 2015, 16, in cities in towns that were quite depopulated, the resistance locally was very high. So that's why we have to understand the local dynamics, and it's not any resettlement scheme works. And we have to have when I was in Lithuania, for instance, there are all these discussions. Migration is the key question for Europe, and this has to be discussed from the local to the pan-European level. So I think it's a difficult one to handle.
Actually, I think I already offered some perspective on this, but I think it will be important to understand the history of this process, the migration, for example, the deindustrialization and the collectivization as main reasons that people decided to go out, yes, and then to reflect on the possibility to attract these persons in after we have the answers on the question what they desire for their future, because we don't know nothing about this. We know the present. We know the photography of this moment, but we don't know how they imagine the future of their lives, not only in terms of from a day to another, but in terms of the project for 5 years or something like this. So I think we must first of all, for me, it's important to ask, to have answers to and to imagine this project in terms of co-production of politics, not only seeing these territories as a safari. It's like going by car, making photos, discussing for 2 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hours. So making some very important projects in terms of extract the answer of these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We are approaching the end of our time, and I have one last quick question, which is in the name of our pavilion, and it is for everybody. What do you think? Are borders really fading or not? Elena?
From a point of view, no. Because what I was telling you earlier about the Romanians who bring Romania with them in the fields of Germany, in agriculture, it's true because actually they never left the country. They brought Romania with them there. They eat sarmale, they eat meat, they listen to Romanian music, they don't learn German, they don't leave the farm to visit Germany because they have to struggle to save any money they earn there. So I think they continue to have this border with them, even though they live in Germany. The border is still there. It's a huge border between Germany and the people who are working in the fields. And I had the same feeling in Spain when I went to where the strawberry pickers work to capture to Capșunari, we felt that Romania is there with them and that the border is still there because they are not in Spain. You know, these people were picking strawberries and they were 9 kilometers away from the ocean, and they never went to see the ocean. They were coming to the same place near the ocean to pick strawberry. But in all those years, they never went to see the ocean. Only one woman said, "Oh, I was once to see the ocean 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I went, I saw the ocean. Oh, and the waves were so big, and that's it." So the borders don't fade. The borders are there, and they are so powerful. But in the same time, you have these Romanians who are the ones who are very well from an economic point of view. They have good jobs, they earn a lot of money, they speak German or Italian or Spanish or Portuguese, and they integrate. And yes, for them the borders are fading for these people because for them it's very easy to have a job in Romania or to have a job in Germany. And I don't know if they don't like, for example, now in the United Kingdom, they don't like the United Kingdom after Brexit. They can move in another country. There's no problem for them. So I think if you are privileged, yes, the borders are fading. But I think that if you come from a very poor environment, no, the borders are there and they are getting stronger.
Thank you. Ilinca?
Just a quick comment. I believe that vice versa, even if it's very true what you said, Elena, that they have that most of these people live in sort of a small Romania that's like an island in a sea of Italy or Spain or whatever. But should the return migration occur in some cases, the reverse thing happens. So when they come to Romania, they also take a little piece of Italy and of Spain and whatever with them. And I think that this exchange is one of the keys of working with this subject, and it definitely translates in their wishes, in what they expect from a city and from a house, because they are changed. I mean, even though they live in very precarious conditions when they are abroad, when they come to Romania, I mean, this is of course based on some talks that I've had with few people, so I haven't had a broad research on that. But what I've noticed is that they are changed and they want something better, not only from their own house in an introverted way, but they expect something from their urban life, from their city to give back to them. And from that point of view, I think it's a drama of inadaptation in both ways, but that could be exploited in a good sense for the future cities, maybe.
So I will briefly add and recall the image of these people that Elena talked about, and I will underline this very important image of the mobility of these persons, but on the same time the immobility inside the place they live when they arrive in Europe. And this is a very important aspect of their life. Actually, we discussed this day about the image of Romanian migrants not going to the restaurants in order to not spend the money and going to have picnic in the parks. And you see this from Milano to Sardinia to Spain and France and Portugal. You know, you have all this idea of preserving the money for a certain future. So we don't spend money on the restaurant. We don't go to the ocean. We are not very mobile there, but we are mobile between our country and Europe. And this is very, very interesting topic.
So there's been a lot of discussion of not having migration as it used to be, but having transnationalism, people living between the places. So sometimes you have people really having jobs, like truck drivers who go to places, or academics, for instance. But I would say that what Elena was mentioning somehow is a border in the mind, as in German people talk about die Mauer im Kopf, the wall of Berlin in someone's head. But in this case, the border is somehow a blockage, is a mental blockage. However, their lives actually do cross borders, and people do increasingly move. For instance, you have this large movement from Romanian migrants in Spain who went to Germany or to England. So people did move countries. What actually created a block and a very interesting moment to think was COVID, the COVID crisis, and how borders suddenly started mattering again. So people were caught, and they were not only caught in whatever respective country they were in, they were caught in a discourse of the politics. All of us who were stuck abroad during the COVID, we realized what borders matter, not only because, for instance, in the town I live at the border, they built a damn fence between Germany and Switzerland, like a real fence separating couples and families, but all the leaders talked about les Français, the Deutsche Bürger, using concepts of the citizens and the nation, and then all these millions of Romanians, of Moroccans, of Uruguayans who wonder, who am I caught in this? Suddenly borders mattered again. So now we're again at a crossroads. Migration is an important thing, but also the way that we live together, going back to this mantra of the Biennale, is also about how do we understand that we are kind of a transnational planet, and we cannot just go back to the hard borders as they used to be. We have to understand people's existence like that and make sense of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I think this is really a starting point. I think it was a meaningful talk we had, and I hope it is a starting point for something. We will end our talk here. If someone has questions here or online, we are not online? Oh, okay. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed, and see you again soon. Tomorrow, yes, sorry. Bye, thank you very much. Bye. Thank you. Yes, tomorrow we will be at ICR, and we will be launching our Mazzocchio review printed issue, special issue of the Biennale, and so see you there at 5 o'clock. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's great.
You have some